Hi there. Give me a second to share my screen and I will begin my presentation. All right. Guiding your children into their potential, shifting your parenting perspective to make it possible. We're going to learn during this next 30-ish minutes how to shift our parenting so that we can guide our children into their greatest potential. Who am I? My name is Kim Muench. I am a JAI Institute for Parenting certified parent coach. I am founder of Real Life Parent Guide. I have been coaching parents, specifically moms of teenagers, for the past 5 years. I also have 5 children of my own, 4 boys and a girl. They range in age at this point from 33 down to 15. So I have boys that are 33, 27, 22, 17, and then our only daughter is 15. So 2 in high school and at home yet, 3 pretty much grown and flown. This is my personal experience. So I've had 3+ decades of personal experience. I have been coaching other parents for the past 5 years. I have a degree in psychology with an emphasis on substance abuse counseling. And that came about actually because my eldest son fell into an addiction to alcohol during his late teen and early 20 years, which is really what prompted me. My own parenting challenges are really what prompted me to become a parent coach. So anyway, he is now 10 years sober, and that is a wonderful thing. But I have learned a great deal from my own parenting challenges over the last 30+ years. And my passion and purpose, I believe, is to really educate and help parents, specifically of teenagers, to shift the way that they're raising their children so that you can have long-term fantastic results in relationships with them. I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that. I promise you as we go along here. So for the last 20 years, I have had a teenager or more than one in my home. So I've really made it my business to educate myself, to stay on top of latest findings for teenagers, and to really immerse myself in adolescence, which, by the way, starts at the onset of puberty. So for most kids, it starts between the ages of 10 and 12, boys and girls. Girls tend to be a little bit earlier than boys, sometimes starting as early as 8, and boys sometimes not starting till 14. So in that early pre-adolescent age range is when adolescence officially starts. It ends in the mid-20s with the evolution of the brain, the fully functioning frontal lobe, that place where we can make good decisions. And we know as adults, even that doesn't always happen, right? But it's certainly, so there's about a 15-year period of time when I talk about adolescence as we go along here. So whether your child is not there yet or right in the midst of it, this talk is going to be beneficial for no matter what age your child is. Let's begin. Okay, I just want to share some really alarming statistics. We know that 2020 has been a really challenging year, and we don't have statistics out yet for exactly how mental health looks for our kids this year, but what we do have is a clear picture of everything up and through 2019. So 7.4% of children aged 3 to 17, approximately 4.5 million kids, have been diagnosed with a behavior problem. Approximately 4.4 million kids ages 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with anxiety. And approximately 1.9 million kids have been diagnosed with depression. These are just kids that have been diagnosed with this. We know that anxiety and depression and behavior challenges in our kids are widespread, further than have been officially diagnosed, right? And I believe our children's behavior is showing us a couple of things. One, lives are too busy, our schedules are too busy. We're not having enough family time together, quality time together. 2, screens are having an effect on our kids, no question about it, in terms of their ability to focus, their imagination, their ability to socialize effectively. Screen time is definitely having an effect on those things as well as their level of anxiety. So much information coming at them just feels like, it's fearful. We all have like a ton of information coming at us, and just it's overwhelming at times, and certainly to our kids as well. So I also believe that our kids are coming into the world even more sensitive than previous generations. Sensitive in terms of wanting to see change, wanting to have a more open mind about everything from sexuality to gender to sustainability to what size home they want to live in, what kind of footprint in general they want to create on the world. So I believe the two most important reasons that we need to shift the way we're parenting are because our children are coming into the world more sensitive, and because like I said, our schedules and our everyday life has been just super, super busy. And this is another reason. Their behavior is showing us that we've got to do something different. And it starts with us. It starts with adults. Everything starts at home. It starts with us, the parents. Okay, so let's talk about human behavior. And I don't mean if your child is 2 or 12 or 22. I mean all human behavior, you and me both, as well as anyone else listening to this presentation. So there are 6 basic emotional human needs, and those include acceptance, affection, appreciation, attention, autonomy, and connection. Let's break those down a little bit, okay? So acceptance. We are always looking to fit in, to be accepted, to know that we matter. Whether we're in a marriage, whether in a friendship. I mean, if you think about all of our relationships over our time or over our lives, acceptance is really important to us. Affection. We are made for connection and affection, right? And it may look different with your 2-year-old. Your 2-year-old may love your hugs and kisses and stuff, but your 12-year-old or 16-year-old may not. And so you have to adapt over time to how you're going to show them affection. I'll give you an example. My 17-year-old son is not an overly affectionate person. Never has been. Even as a baby, he wasn't really a cuddler. But I've learned that it's important for me, especially as he's doing his virtual learning from home 100% of the time as he finishes high school, to go in, knock on his door and ask for permission to come in, open the door. Hey, how you doing? And just check in on him. That's my way of showing him affection. He is not one that even likes a rub on the back. I don't know why, but all our kids are different, right? So you have to find that way as they get older and older to be able to show them affection. Appreciation. Everyone likes to be appreciated, right? So make it a point if your child does something that you didn't even ask them to do. Let's say they, I don't know, brought up a basket of laundry that was sitting in the kitchen that was clean and needed to go upstairs. Make sure you point that out. It's important. We all want to be appreciated. Moms especially want to be appreciated. Actually, let me just take that back. Everybody wants to be appreciated. Moms just feel like they don't get enough appreciation. Attention. Everyone wants our attention, right? And when I'm in my office and one of my kids comes in and they want to talk to me, I make it a point to put down whatever I'm doing. Generally, it's on my computer. Just look up and make eye contact with them and say, how can I help you? Because if I don't do that, if I continue to go on with what I'm doing, they will either say something or they'll become, I don't want to say a pest, because at 15 and 17, they're not pests. but they'll find their way to mess around with the dog who's generally in my office or whatever to make some kind of disruption. It's just a lot easier and a lot quicker, and I can get back to what I was doing when I make the effort to look up, ask them what they'd like, how can I best support them, and then I can do it and get back to work. Autonomy. Ooh, so autonomy is about us becoming who we're meant to be, our children becoming who they're meant to be. And that might look like allowing them to try a sport or an activity that maybe you don't necessarily love or you're worried about the risk of. Allowing them to try on things, especially as they grow through their teen years, to figure out who they are and then appreciate them for who they are. Rather than, let's say you played football as a kid and you just want your kid to play football because you played football, doesn't necessarily mean that your kid's a football player. And giving them that choice in their lives helps develop their autonomy. Connection. Like I said, Brene Brown says this all the time. We are built and wired for connection. One of our basic human emotional needs is to be able to connect with one another and to have that and to feel seen and heard. This is so, so important as we parent our children. Okay. Let's talk about parenting and what it's looked like through the generations. I am 52 years old. So in my generation, or the way I was parented, is very different from the way that I am parenting my children. Generational parenting practices included, so previous to this, traditional, the dominant parenting paradigm. Traditional parenting has looked like my grandparents' parenting, my parents' parenting, looked like children are seen and not heard. Now, I think in my grandparents' generation, that was way more important. It kind of probably lessened a little bit, and kids were more recognized for their opinions and thoughts and their feelings when my mom was growing up, and even more so when I was growing up. But again, not nearly as much as we can be doing. So traditionally, kids were seen and not heard. The parent knows best. Kids were given a limited number of choices. We were disciplined with punishment. I spent most of middle, high, and high school grounded. Let me just tell you, when I became a parent and my kids started getting to middle school and high school age, I decided I was never going to ground my kids. I look back at my own raising and I think how that did not help me. I was grounded from like one report card to the next report card because I didn't meet my parents' expectations of my grades. And it didn't help me to be grounded. In fact, it might have even demotivated me, as opposed to them saying, how can I help you? Should we get a tutor? Something like that. Grounding me was not helpful. Little thought was given to children's feelings and needs. Like I said, I think this is probably way more prevalent in my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation, but certainly in my generation. My parents, I can't say they never asked me how I felt about things, but in general, I think we very much knew that we had to behave at a certain level in order to feel love and acceptance from our parents. And that doesn't go along with the idea of unconditional love for everyone, right? I want you to let that sink in for a second. So traditionally, in previous generations of parenting, the traditional parenting paradigm, a child's behavior is more important than the relationship. Now, I want to talk about how we need to shift, because again, our children's behavior is really showing us that we need to evolve the way that we are working with them and not trying to control over them. So I'm going to call this intentional parenting evolution. And on that side of the slide, we have the child is seen and appreciated for their perspective and feelings. Parents work with the child, not over them in an attempt to control. They're not parenting out of fear, they're parenting out of love and connection. Choices are given when possible and early in life, increasing with age and maturity. So starting at the age of, I don't know, 2. I know my daughter had an opinion about what she was wearing at age 2. Putting out a couple of different outfits and saying, which would you like to wear today? That's another way to really develop our kids' autonomy. The way they present themselves is really important to them. And after 4 boys, believe me, I definitely wanted to dress my daughter in dresses like every day. But by 2, she was not having it. And it was a lesson for me. And I could have probably pursued and pushed it and probably had a very unhappy toddler if I had made her continue to wear tights and dresses. But I didn't. I gave her that autonomy. I gave her that choice. And as time goes on, I think we need to give our kids more and more choice as to when they do their homework. What they certainly don't become a short order cook and offer everyone a different dinner. That's definitely not okay. I'm talking about where you can give them some choices. Their extracurricular activities. If it's running you ragged to have your kid in 3 different things because that's what they want to be in, you need to step in and say, you need to make a choice between these. Or maybe you play a season of this and a season of that, right? Choices, important. Natural consequences are allowed to play out to teach accountability and self-regulation. So often in parenting, we're seeing parents rush in to fix something or to make sure their child is protected and doesn't have a certain experience. If you look back on your own life and you think about where you really grew as an individual, where you learned resilience and grit, it was during those challenges in your life. So allowing our children to have the natural consequences to their actions is really important. And the relationship, so in intentional parenting, this evolution I'm talking about, this guiding your child into their greatest potential, which is the topic we're talking about, the relationship is valued and behavior falls into place because of the connection. Now, I want to be really careful and make a point here, and that is I'm not asking you to shift out of being the respect and authority figure into a friend. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Conscious parenting, intentional parenting, very much has structure to it. Very much you don't become the permissive parent that, hey, whatever the kid wants to do, just let them do it. Please, please don't think that's what I'm asking you to do. What I'm saying is the connection with our children is more important. Parenting with love and connection rather than through fear, which causes disconnection. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so the shift that needs to take place as our kids progress through their teen years, they're into their teen years and through their teen years. The first about 12 years of life, we're really in the teaching mode, right? We start with teaching them big things like how to blow their nose, how to drink out of a straw, how to eat, how to go potty, how to ride a bike, how to cook, how to drive a car, how to do their laundry, all of these things. But during the first 12 years, we have a much more concentrated effort in the teaching mode, okay? Contributions, what is that gonna look like? Manners, we want our children to know to share. We want our children to understand that the world is bigger than them, and it's important to say please and thank you. And it's important to take turns. These are all the things that we're teaching, especially in the first decade of life. Because what we teach them at home is also reinforced, hopefully, and brought into the schools, right? So we're working closely with the schools. As our kids are progressing through preschool and elementary school, we are right there with the teachers and we are working with them to instill some basic human habits, some basic characteristics into our kids. And then around age 12, right around, right as middle school progresses, for sure, because our kids, they start changing classes, and their bodies start changing, and their friendships start looking a little bit different. So we want to shift into a guiding mode during the middle school years. And this is what I mean when I say parenting with, especially during these years, rather than over our kids. So you want to be able to give them increasing number of choices. Again, the homework has to get done. But if it doesn't get done right after they get home from school, if they choose to do it after dinner, or they choose to get up in the morning and do it early, you have to kind of allow them to get some rhythm into their own lives and what makes sense to them. Patience as they take on new activities. I think it's really important. So many kids they get to an age where they don't really want to try anything new because they feel like, if I don't do well at this right off the bat, there's no point in trying. And even as adults, if you think about it, it's really hard to try something new. We don't do too many new things as adults. So it's important that we have patience as they begin to try on new things, and to encourage them when they've got something new that they want to try. To encourage them means, to drive them someplace if they need to go someplace, to take them to Hobby Lobby if they need, art supplies because they want to try macrame or whatever it is. To just encourage that creativity in them, whether it's a sport or a musical instrument or an art activity, whatever it is. And then as we're also in that guiding mode through their adolescence, we want to allow mistakes. I talked about this a minute ago, but we want to allow mistakes and small steps to success. Life is not a straight path. We think it should be as parents, right? Check the box. Elementary school, middle school, high school, AP courses during that, yada, yada, yada. Get the car for the 16th birthday if you're in that kind of parenting mode. College after high school, then you get married. Life doesn't always work that way. And when our kids go off the path or don't meet our expectations exactly the way we want them to, we can really begin to take it personally as a parent. And that's what causes tension and disconnection, again, during the teenage years. When our kids aren't meeting our expectations, it's more about us than it is about them. Everyone's got a different pace. Everyone's got a different drum to beat. And as parents, when we can encourage each of our children's specific drums, that is when they thrive. Okay, so mom and dad, you're here today, and you are your child's guide. You are the backbone that teaches them what emotional life looks like. And I just have a quick question for you, and that is, do you want to be the family that looks like the slide on my left? Maybe you're right. But my left, where there's yelling and there's tension, or do you want to have the kind of relationship with your child as he or she gets older that looks like the picture on the right? We want our kids need us during their growing years. They need us to be able to listen to them, to not freak out when they come and tell us something about them or about a friend of theirs. They need to know that we have their back and that we are there to support them through, let's face it, growing up these days is very different than any of us experienced. And it's important, even if they don't appear as though they want you in their lives, they do, and they need you. So we are their guides. We are their models. Okay, I'm just going to read this quote out loud because I just think it's so good. Many believe that parenting is about controlling children's behavior and training them to act like adults. I believe that parenting is about controlling my own behavior and acting like an adult myself. Children learn what they live. Let's just think about that for a second. And I want you to think back just for a moment to your own upbringing. And if you ever say to yourself now, God, I'm yelling just like my mom did, or God, I'm behaving exactly like my father. Where did this come from? If you don't make conscious decisions in your parenting to do something different, you're going to defer to what you experienced growing up. We just have this, our children come into the world and they mirror these behaviors to us, and we're going to start to respond as our parents once did, unless we work on ourselves and make a conscious decision to do things differently. Like I did when I said I wasn't going to ground my kids. It wasn't helpful. I thought back long enough on my childhood and what my parents did to help me, and what they failed to see in me and what I needed. And I wanted to do better for my own children. So I want to invite you to do the same right here. So evolving to with rather than over means that we are the examples of emotion for our children, right? So we need to model our emotional life for them. We need to talk about emotions. We need to identify different emotions. You know, I remember growing up, like, anger at my house wasn't really acceptable from kids, for sure. I don't know, maybe you grew up the same way. It was okay for us to be happy, maybe sad on occasion, but scared or angry didn't go over very well at my house. And so it's important that our children be able to identify their feelings and be able to have their feelings. Oh my gosh, how often as an adult or as a parent have you rushed your child through a feeling they were having, or ignored it, hoping it would go away, or ignored it, or said something that got them to a place where they repressed their feeling because the feeling was emotionally uncomfortable for you. We need to be able to express and feel our feelings. Feelings do flow. They flow through us. They may stay longer than we want them to. Some of those negative, anxious, high anxiety feelings. We all have some level of anxiety, and that's totally fine. And that's actually can be very motivating. A level of anxiety, though, that is detrimental to everyday life. We might, you're fine, push them through it because it's uncomfortable for us to feel or to deal with, or we don't have time to deal with it. But it's really important that we start talking about our feelings and that we help our kids identify what they're feeling. And the last thing on this slide is working on our own emotional baggage. We can't be attuned to what our children need emotionally if we aren't working on ourselves. And we tend to put ourselves last. But when we are not in alignment, when we are dealing with overwhelm or stress, when we aren't taking good care of our own physical and emotional well-being, we cannot be what our children need us to be. And that's patient and graceful at times, to forgive ourselves and forgive them. We've got to work on ourselves so that our kids, first of all, see that. They know that they know that we value ourselves because we take care of ourselves, and that we're modeling it for them. Okay, so I want to give you some specific examples of what does parenting with look like. By the way, This is my lovely family. We don't get the opportunity to take family pictures very often. So this is from 2019. But yeah, so my husband, Tom, and sons, Nick, Alan, Michael, Brigham, Maddox, and Mia. Like I said before, Maddox and Mia are truly the only ones home at this point. The other three are grown and flown in three very different directions. And it's been such a pleasure to watch them evolve into who they're meant to be. Okay, what does it look like to parent with? One of the things I work on with parents when I coach them is really understanding what their values are, because it's amazing how you can go through life and think you're instilling certain values in your kids, but your everyday activity and your words are not in alignment with what you're hoping to instill in them in terms of a value. And when these two aren't in alignment with one another, your children's words and behavior will call BS on you. I will just say that, right? They may not say it directly to your face, but their behavior and their words and their actions are showing you when you are not in alignment with what it is you're planning to teach or what it is you plan to instill in them. Example, honesty. We obviously all want our kids to be honest. But let's say you go shopping with your daughter and you know your husband's not going to be real thrilled about it. And she wants some pair of shoes that's like $60 and you know that you can't truly afford it and your husband would probably be upset about it if you did it, but she's looking so cute at you and you know it would totally make her day. So you buy the shoes and you say, don't tell dad. Okay, right there. If we want our kids to be honest, but we're hiding things from people that we love the most, then, it's just not, your kid is getting the wrong message, right? They're getting conflicting messages is what they're getting. So the next time your daughter then, tells a little white lie about where she was, then you go fly off the handle. Really, again, it's not making sense to them. And this doesn't mean that as parents, we have to be perfect and absolutely never make a mistake or say something that is not in alignment with ourselves. But if we catch ourselves in that situation, let's say mom says, you know what, I really like to buy them for you. And I know in the past I've done that and I've said, don't tell dad, but you know what, that's really not okay. So we're just going to have to pass on those shoes today. Okay, putting structure in place early and steadily, giving your kids more choice in their lives the older they get, helps them to develop self-efficacy and autonomy. Right? So we want to put, and delayed gratification, which I don't say here, but when we put structure in place for them, I'll just use the example of, bedtime. Hold on one second, I just need a drink. When we have a standard bedtime in place early, that's a structure, right? So when our kids get older, maybe they could stay up longer, but they don't choose to stay up all night long. We have boundaries. Boundaries piggyback on values, but we put some basic structures in place. We're not eating cake for breakfast, that kind of thing. Putting in place early and steadily, and then as your kids are growing up, giving them some more space, some more choices, allowing them to become who they're meant to be, not who you need them to be to pat yourself on the back as a parent, right? Okay. Getting curious about their interests rather than wanting to have them play a sport you played. We talked about football earlier in this presentation. The instrument you excelled at, the grades you got, they're not a mini you. They may not want to go to Texas A&M just because you did. That's just an example, not pointing at you specifically. Any school, right? They may not want to play piano because you never did. And We need to be careful as parents not to take things so personally, right? Another thing about getting curious, it's really important. It's important that when your child is misbehaving or acting out in some way, that you get curious about the behavior instead of getting furious. Dr. Justin Colson, who's an Australian psychologist, says this, and I just love it. Get curious, not furious. So learning to take a step back and respond with curiosity rather than jump in and react. This is the emotional maturity of a parent. What's going on? Why is my child behaving this way? What one of the 6 emotional needs we talked about needs to be addressed? Maybe it's acceptance, maybe it's affection, maybe they're having a bad day. Goodness knows you come in the door some nights and you don't know, your kids don't know that you just went through traffic or that your paycheck wasn't what you thought it would be this month or whatever else that you're carrying when you come into the home. They too, during their school day, have encounters with people, with teachers, with students, with friends that may or may not, have imprinted on their heart that day. So getting curious about their behavior and what's beneath the behavior is important. So important to be playful with your kids. Even now, I hate cooking, but we have Alexa or Google, we have Google in our kitchen. And when it's time to cook, I turn on the lights and I say, okay, Google, play some 70s music. Or, okay, Google, play Bare Naked Ladies. So that there's some music in the background and I can dance around the kitchen because I really don't like cooking, but at least it lightens my mood. And it's just kind of a routine that I've created for myself. And my kids have commented over the years on kind of how crazy I am when I dance around the kitchen. And I don't care. I mean, when our kids are little, it's like we're willing to be silly with them, but then they kind of get a little bit older and we feel like we need to be so reserved and whatnot. It is so important that you be playful with your child. Don't ever lose that. Don't ever lose that. I'll tell you a little bit about something that's become a tradition at our house. Many years ago, and I can't remember exactly how many, it's been a long time. I used to go room to room to say goodnight to each of my kids. And at one point, somehow we shifted into just meeting in someone's room in particular. So right now, it's my daughter's room. And so my 17-year-old and my 15-year-old gather in there at night between 10:30 and 11. And they call me up and we have what's called the party. And the party really just consists of them unpacking their day with me. And my 17-year-old son is my quietest child, certainly the quietest of all the boys. And my daughter has a salt lamp and she turns on the salt lamp and we're just kind of sitting in there and it's just kind of this real dim glow. And they're willing to share about their day and what's on their hearts. They may have said nothing at dinner time, but for whatever reason, at bedtime, they're willing to open up. And they're too old at this point for them to be stalling. Right? I mean, they probably did that at 5 and 7, but they're not stalling at 15 and 17. Quite frankly, they might want me to leave so they can, go back to what they were doing before I was in the room. But I love that we have this time together. And it's funny because if someone has something really important to share or to talk about at the party, they might say at dinner time, I've got tea for the party. So it's been a very cute tradition. And I know it's gone on, I can't remember how long, but a long time, because even when our big boys come back, the older boys that are not living at home anymore, when they come back for Christmas or Thanksgiving or just stop by, I have one son that lives in an apartment 5 minutes from our house. And sometimes he just stops in between 10:30 and 11 o'clock at night and shows up at the party. It's just super heartwarming to know that kids, want to spend time with you. Excuse me. So be playful with your kids. Parenting with, okay, setting boundaries around screen time early and being consistent. easy for me to say. I've watched the evolution of electronics in our household. My oldest son was 11 or 13 when we got our first home computer. And he didn't have a smartphone until he was in his mid-20s. My daughter wanted a smartphone. She wanted it in 5th grade, but it was Christmas of 6th grade that she got it. And I realize that's early for some parents. And looking back, I would say the same thing. I think we were in a situation like many parents are, where everybody else has one and your kid's the odd man out. And you worry about I worried at least about what the ramifications were going to be to that. It's easy to say, we're waiting until 8th grade. I don't really care, when your child is looking at you and you literally know that every one of her friends has it. But setting boundaries around screen time early and being consistent. Let's just say you're the parent that maybe didn't set down the rules right away, or maybe you haven't been consistent. Your kid's never too old for you to sit down and revisit that. One of the most important things, two non-negotiables. Phone in the bedroom at night, never. So disruptive to their sleep. And so many behaviors our children have are because they're not getting a good night's sleep. And the phone contributes to that. And having dinner together as a family as often as you can without phones. That means you too, mom and dad, no phones at the table. 2 non-negotiables. Okay. Here you see a couple of my very favorite parenting books. It's important, no matter what your child's age. I mean, we do a fantastic job of reading about pregnancy while we're pregnant and babies and learning about toddlers. And then life gets busy and we forget to read about the developmental age that our child is in. I think it's really important to continue to educate yourself. Excuse me. So these are just a few of my all-time favorites. Superpowered by Rini Jain and Dr. Shefali Sabari just came out on kids and anxiety. How to Raise an Adult is another excellent book by Julie Lythcott-Hames. Boundaries with Teens by Dr. Townsend is wonderful and like a for sure read if you've got teenagers. Okay, our long-term goal is to have loving relationships with our adult children and their kids when they come along, right? Relationships that are built on mutual respect. We can't have mutually respectful relationships with our children if we don't respect who they are. We can't ask them to show us respect if we don't respect them. We model. We begin the process. What starts at home, in your relationships, in the foundation, gets brought into our schools, into our community, and into the world at large. We adults, we parents, are responsible for what the next generation brings. And when we continue to want to be right instead of in relationship with our kids, we are hurting them and we are hurting the future generation. So in order to guide your child into their highest potential, you need to work on you. This quote came to me one day. I think I was vacuuming, or I'm not sure what I was doing, some mundane household task. But it's this. Our children come through us, not for us, except for the lessons they reflect to us during their journey. in an effort to grow us up along the way. Our children are our greatest teachers. We also teach them things, but our role as the older they get is to fall into a guide mode and to parent with them, cultivating love and connection as opposed to over them, which cultivates fear and ultimately disconnection. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. I feel incredibly blessed to have shared this with you. If you would like to, hold on one second, I'm just going to move this up here. If you have questions for me, if you would like a complimentary 20-minute phone conversation to talk about your family's needs and my coaching abilities, I would love to connect with you. You can call me at the number on the screen, 972-689-0250, or you can find me at www.reallifeparentguide, that's only one L, .com, reallifeparentguide.com. Thank you, and I wish you the very best as you continue on your parenting journey.